Hey guys, John B here with PhoneArena. So it's kind of tough for me to talk about this topic that I'm going to go through, but I kind of think it needs to be told. So last year I did a piece on HTC smartphone designs and how I love them. My very first smartphone was an HTC device. It was the HTC Apache, a slider, QWERTY keyboard, Windows Mobile, great phone. That's the first time I fell in love with the company and its devices. And since then, I kept on loving it. But then a few weeks ago, my colleague Georgie, he wrote a piece on why did HTC smartphones go from popular to obscure. It's a great read and I highly recommend you checking it out, but I honestly share his sentiments about it. And it's sad because I've been always a fan of HTC smartphones. HTC is a name we hear less and less often, and it won't surprise us if some of you younger viewers haven't even seen an HTC smartphone in the flesh. Now, it's hard to believe that back in 2011, HTC was the third biggest phone manufacturer by global market share, only behind Samsung and Apple. Around the same time too, the company was top dog in the US, holding 24% of the market. HTC's phones were the go-to Android devices and offered an extremely good price-to-performance ratio. Sadly, it was all downhill from there. HTC's decline was so drastic. So what caused the dreadful collapse? In short, competition, but not without some help from HTC itself. In 2012, HTC's CEO said the company won't be making budget phones to preserve its image as a high-end quality brand. In reality, it probably wouldn't have achieved high sales even if they tried, as Chinese manufacturers were already taking over the segment. Around the same time, HTC's executive tied the company to another sinking ship, saying that HTC is committed to Windows Phone more than ever. In 2013, HTC released the flagship, the HTC One, which became its most popular, best-selling smartphone ever, and it also raised hopes that the company is back on the right track after a couple of years in decline. Despite the record, the sales numbers were far from those of Samsung and Apple. The Galaxy S4 was the main competitor of the HTC One and sold roughly 7 times more units, even though HTC's phone was a fair match specs-wise. The company's apparent focus on the high-end wasn't panning out as its executives imagined. Sadly, HTC's next contender, the M8, performed worse on the market than its predecessor. One of the main weaknesses of the M8 and other HTC flagships around that time was the camera, performing noticeably worse than those of the competitors. By that time, HTC's executives had changed their tune again, saying that the company wasn't aiming for high sales numbers and beating Samsung and Apple in the high-end segment. Instead, they wanted to deliver good phones to a strong community. You're probably noticing a pattern here. Turns out HTC's fanbase wasn't that strong. The HTC One M9 bombed spectacularly, cutting HTC's market evaluation in half in the process. HTC had more than Samsung to worry about, however. Chinese manufacturers such as Huawei and Xiaomi were gaining speed fast, gradually moving towards high-end devices and taking large chunks of market shares from the weaker competitors on the way. HTC, being weakened by poor results over the last few years, was the easiest prey, and there was no mercy. HTC valiantly continued to release new flagships, its latest U12 Plus being a very decent smartphone. However, people just don't seem to care about what HTC is doing anymore, and the company's releases get a minimum amount of attention from the media and consumers alike. This points toward another problem with HTC that my colleague mentions, and that's the poor management and marketing. If the company is making a good product, it's up to the marketing team to make it known and convince people it's worth buying, even more so when attention's fleeing away. HTC couldn't afford to spend on wide-reaching marketing campaigns like what Samsung was able to do. As a result, HTC's flagships often remain outside people's attention and consequently out of their pockets as well. And the way the marketing team used the resources it had at its disposal wasn't the most impactful either. Despite change being the motto of the company's campaign, it didn't really change HTC's fortunes. It focused mainly on the brand's name and its newly found quirkiness, trying to create the sensation of it being fresh and different. Ultimately, there was just too much randomness and too little sense in the ads, with the company's phones barely making an appearance. The campaigns caused more ridicule than admiration and failed to make a meaningful impact on the company's image. And to highlight what HTC was up against during 2013, Samsung spent $10 billion to market its smartphones, by far the most out of all smartphone manufacturers. Also, HTC executives have often been too optimistic about the future. One of them stated in 2013 that the worst has probably passed, and another just recently said the company will gain market share and turn a profit in 2019. Proof that there was still some value in HTC came in 2017 when Google spent $1.1 billion to acquire part of the company's research and development department for its own line of smartphones. HTC's mobile division saw several reductions in staff over the years, making the executive's claims of a successful 2019 dubious at best. Probably the most telling sign of how big of a fall HTC experienced is the change in its stock price. Topping at $42 per share in 2011, right now shares go for under $1.30, or about 4% of its former value. A beacon of light for HTC has been its VR headset, the HTC Vive, which has established itself as being one of the premier VR devices out there. HTC spun off the Vive into a separate company in 2016, likely so it can be pushed away from the sinking ship that is HTC's mobile division. With that said, 2019 might be the last in which a new HTC sees the light of day. And that is it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Definitely check out that article posted by my colleague Georgie that really goes into detail about HTC's decline. And for myself, I'm kind of still sad about it because I've always been a fan of HTC devices since the early days with Windows Mobile into Android and even Windows Phone. And now to see where they're at, it really breaks my heart. So if you guys want to learn more about anything I talked about in this video, you can check out our website, PhoneArena.com. This is John V, signing off.